Hello, everybody, and welcome to Breaking Story with Young Screenwriters. I'm Alexie, and I'm here today with Theo and Adam. And today we are tackling a very fun and often humiliating for me subject, taking meetings and pitching your work. So, to start things off, I figured I would ask you both, what was your best and worst meeting that you've ever taken? Adam.
Adam, you're muted.
Sorry about that.
It was a great story.
I was just spilling my guts out. So one of my best meetings, honestly, have been like last year. I've had like about 8 that have been really amazing and really great. So I'm happy. Pre WGA obviously strike and
good save.
Yes. But like I feel like I've gotten better is my point at it. My worst ones were when I really just had no idea what the hell I was talking about. Story was like when I feel like I've always been very comfortable like having a conversation and pitching myself. My worst meetings were when I didn't have good material to be talking about. Like I didn't have a good story, or I didn't have something to work with. Right. When I had something to work with, I felt like more confident. It was easier to do kind of like the thing that I think is like my baseline advice for people when they're like trying to like talk about a movie they're working on or a project, which is basically try to talk about this as if it's like your favorite movie to a friend, like really comfortable, like talk about what's special and exciting in like a genuine aspirational way. And that's a lot easier for me personally when the material is better, or like I believe in it, or I've really thought about it. So I think, that's kind of a cop-out answer, but like it's been directly proportional, my experience, to how strong the material is. Because even if somebody like isn't interested or whatever, they get a read of your confidence as a storyteller and like your self-possession and all of these things. So that's my answer. Yeah. What about you?
I've had a lot of great meetings, and to start off, most of my meetings have been in the publishing space, so a little bit different. Publishing meetings are, I would say, a lot more casual and a lot more about people. Like when you're having a meeting in that space, it's really about like, okay, do we vibe? Do we like the same things? Do we have the same sense of humor? And I feel like whenever I've started with that, whenever it's been about, okay, like what are the things that we have in common that we can either snark or like make jokes about, or like, fangirl about or whatever, then everything has gone swimmingly. Because then what usually happens in meetings is, for me anyway, is that I will have these conversations and get to know who the person is. And then it's like, oh, okay, now we have to get down to business. Here's what it is. Here's what I've got for you, or here's what I do. Or, if I'm pitching a client, it's like, okay, here are my clients. Here's what's exciting. Here are the buzzwords that I'm associating with these. Usually very fast paced for me. And those have always really worked well. I don't think that I've had what I would consider a bad meeting.
That is wild to me. Wild. But, I don't know. I feel like my experience has been very different than both of you. Maybe both of you were not, I don't know. But yeah, my worst meeting was probably my first one that I've mentioned before, but we'll mention again. It was my first in-person meeting. I got to go to Cartoon Network, and I was talking about this idea that I had that they thought was cool, and this whole thing was set up, and it was so much fun. And I researched forever. I watched all of like tons of cartoons that were on Cartoon Network right then, and went in, and I treated the whole thing like a job interview. And I felt like I was being, like, I thought it was a job interview. So I treated it like, you ask, I answer, had no idea what I was doing, went horribly, was so incredibly awkward. But like, to me, I was evaluating it as a job interview, and I was like, it was awkward, but I think I gave good answers. And no. Then afterwards, my manager said, hey, I'm going to send you a present. And it was a book called How to Talk to People. I was just like,
that's rough.
He was being really nice.
But that's a great story, Alexie. At least you got that.
Yeah, that's true. But it was, and it was a great book. I read the whole thing and I was like, okay, this makes so much more sense. When I finally understood that it was not a job interview and you were just supposed to like make this person like you and chat with you, all my meetings turned around. Like, the best meetings I ever had were in-person ones in LA, where I went to like the studio and they had a set time. Like it was just like a 30-minute meeting and it went over to like an hour or something until they had to get lunch. That's how you know for me that they're really working, is when they go over their time by quite a bit. So
yeah, I would also add that like when you are pitching your story and your material, kind of what I was saying, like being like, flexible and like thinking about it, like having fun telling it, like as if you're talking about it like a movie you're excited by, you know, don't memorize things. Like I have found that like while it's really important to like have like a really tight written log line, like don't memorize even that. Like say the log line in your own words in the moment, but like don't like regurgitate memorized material, because there's an energy shift that happens where there's sort of like you meet and greet, like, oh hey, how was your day? In a world full of magicians who are turtles, you know, like
Immediately terrible.
Yeah,
right.
Transition.
Like it feels regurgitated, right? So like if you rather than said like, okay, so this story is about, you know, this is a world where magicians are turtles. So I don't know where that came from. I'm sorry.
We do this every time, Adam. Every time we get a new.
I always come up with some interesting materials. Not strong, but interesting. But no, but like whatever it is, just, you know, you have to memorize your material, but don't regurgitate it like word for word, you know, like, and also I found, you know, maybe this is, I don't know how to describe, I've never really tried to describe this before, but like, I guess it's mirroring, but like, when you're talking, follow the energy and interest. Like if you feel like attention starts to fade, adjust. Like don't just push through a bad feeling. Like if somebody doesn't get something or doesn't seem like their eyes glaze over, like no. Like try to like read like and push the conversation. Be dynamic in the conversation and adjust to like the people. I don't know. It's I know that's maybe easier for some people than others, but it's really important.
I think it takes practice, right? For people who it doesn't come natural. Like I've always found it came natural because I learned at a really young age, like that I had to do that I had to mask a little bit, because I got some bad feedback as a really young kid. And I was like, oh, okay, I need to work on this. So I think it's like you practice, and then also like pitch other people's work, like pitch your favorite book, pitch your favorite movie, record yourself, and just practice yourself pitching it. Like that's the only way you're ever going to get better at it, if you're not like already good at it, is to practice. And you can practice on your own work too. That's great. But like also practice on something that you're already passionate about, because then you'll hear it if you record it like a weirdo, that where your inflection points are and where it is that you sound excited and where you as a listener would become drawn in. And then you can say, okay, this is what's going to work for me in the meeting.
Yeah. I mean, as someone who's whatever charisma I have is 100% manufactured, practicing definitely helps. The other thing that helps is I read that one book. She did a TED Talk. I think it's Amy Cuddy did a TED Talk about presence and kind of like how you have like a better presence in meetings and things like that. And it was a lot about like the space you take up in a room, and the Superman posing. So when I went to LA, every single one of my meetings, I would get there early. I'd find where I was supposed to go. I'd leave and go to the bathroom, set a timer on my phone, make sure the door was as locked as it could be, and then power pose there for the 2 minutes that you're supposed to do. And look, I don't know if it worked because of that, but those meetings all went pretty good. But
I mean, even if it was a placebo for yourself, whatever it is, like, you know, having something to do, right? Like having a technique or like a thing you do that grounds yourself will help you because you did something, right?
Yeah.
You gave yourself power is what you did. And especially I think for women or, you know, femme identifying folks, is that like we often are raised or told that we can't take up space. So being able to do that and, you know, stand tall and take up space is like, oh, wow, I belong here. Because I think that's what we all really want, right? Is to feel like we belong in that room. And so is the people on the other side want to feel the same thing. And I think that it's really a human interaction. And the more human the interaction is, the better the business part of it will go. There was, I've mentioned this before, but a development executive I met not long ago when we had a meeting, And she told me that very specifically, she said, I don't really care how well somebody can write, because I can teach somebody to write. What I care about is that they're a good person and that I can work with them for 6 months to 12 months and I'm going to have a good time. And I really took that to heart.
For sure.
Yeah, that's why you got to be like approaching these conversations with like a kind of just mental low stakes. Even if this is somebody who can like change your life, you like mentally, I found that like you have to like reframe it as like, okay, I'm just gonna talk to somebody about the story I really like, you know, and like I'm like if I can lower the stakes that way, I can be more relaxed, I can be more personable, I can joke better. You know, the pressure gets to people a lot, you know, and I mean, I think you should take the same approach for the high level meeting and some random person in the industry who you're getting 15 minutes coffee with or whatever, you know, like even if you have to change up the material, like if you're pitching executives, you have a different pitch than if you're just chatting to somebody about your story idea, to be clear. But like that mental idea of, I'm just talking about something I really care about and I really like, and I hope you like it too, you know, because if people smell fear like blood in the water, you know, the moment people feel like, oh, they want something from me. Yeah. Even if intellectually they know you want something, you want what they can give you. If you give that energy of like nervousness and desperation, like it colors the whole experience. It changes how people perceive your words. It's a bummer.
Something that always helps me kind of get into it is I practice some like off the cuff remark that I'm going to say right when the meeting starts, just to kind of calm myself down. A lot of my go-to if I do a Zoom meeting is I'll be like, I'll say something about my dogs. Like, oh, you know, I just got to make sure my dogs stay over there. And then they'll be like, oh my God, you have dogs? And I'll be like, yes. And then we'll talk about dogs for a little bit. And then you know that you're in. It's like the best meetings that I had, we just talked nonsense for a long time. And they're like, oh yeah, wait, you're here to tell us about whatever, like tell us about your writing. And then the good news with that too is once you're done, you can send a follow-up email and be like, this thing we talked about, by the way, I found something interesting about it that you might like. You're like learning more about them and making friends. And if
pictures of your dog.
Yes, my dog. I've never done that.
You should do that. Yeah.
That's a great one. See, I have to plan all this. I'm not someone who can like go in and just like be chill and wing it. I'm like, okay, I need to know how I'm going to approach this.
I'm better if I wing it. I like to go in like with like as little preparation as possible. If I prepare, I'm probably not going to be as organic as if I go in like almost as if I didn't even know the meeting was going to happen until that moment. That I'm great because I'm just talking to somebody, right? They're not this like nebulous person. It's like, oh, okay, I'm just having a conversation.
Do you not research them or do you do stuff like that?
I do. I absolutely will research them and then I will forget all about it because I don't want to bring it up in the meeting. I don't want to be like, hey, I've been reading your Twitter for the last 3 weeks obsessively.
Yeah, a year ago, I had an interesting experience where I was hanging out with at my friend's house and they were like, they had an investor in their tech company. I won't go into the details, but like they were like, oh yeah, he's interested in film stuff too. Do you want to talk to him in 15 minutes? And he just set up a Zoom call. And I was like, oh yeah, sure. And I was like, oh, I'm talking to this person who's like a millionaire from, you know, Europe. And okay, I'll talk to you. Sure. And he was like, oh, great. And I told him about 2 of my scripts. He was like, send those over. Those sound great.
You know,
so, but I like literally we were hanging out on her couch to, oh, do you want to talk to like a film investor? You know what I mean? Like that happened. And for me, I feel like I was way better because I was just sort of like, oh, I got to do this, you know, fine. Mm-hmm. And then we'll go and talk about your dog after.
Yeah. About your dog. Yeah. Dogs are a good one. Honestly, any kind of pet I feel like is a good little nonsense starter.
People have animals.
Just don't say what my position, which is that you don't like dogs.
Yeah. Adam's just like, I hate dogs and I hate babies.
I don't hate dogs.
How are you?
I don't hate dogs at all. But it's like, I don't, they don't inspire me. Like I would never want to have one in my house.
Wow. I don't want a dog either, to be fair. I like other people's dogs as long as they're clean.
Smell. I can't stand the smell. When you walk into like a dog house, you're like, oh man, I can smell it.
The cats are great. Dogs.
If somebody
Cats
has a
smell
dog,
too.
it makes me feel
Cats
so
also
much better.
smell. But cats take care of themselves. You know, if you have
That's
a cat, you can leave the house for a couple of days and the cat will still be alive and it will love you and it'll be fine. If you left a dog for a couple of days, it would be dead.
Yeah, my dogs freak out if they're in the other room, you know? Like if me and Carl go in a room and we shut the door, the dogs are both sitting on the other side of the door. And yeah, they'll just sit there. They won't go anywhere else. They'll wait for us to open the door back up. It's a little
They're
much.
children with hair.
They are children. They are, except for they
to-
never get smarter, which is probably not a selling point. But you know what?
No.
They're cute.
They are cute. They're adorable. I love to pet them. I love to rub their little bellies. I love all of that stuff. And then I will go home and, you know, have my
To your cat wife.
And not have,
But this is a great comment, just to reiterate from Kellen, which is if you come off super happy, relaxed, to just tell them about a cool story, then the pitch meeting will be super easy, barely an inconvenience. Yes, that's the goal, because if you think about it from their point of view, if they have to meet, like, if maybe like they're like looking for a particular type of project, they're meeting with dozens of writers, and the meeting that was easy and fun leaves more of an impression.
That is 100%. And I can say that because I've done pitch sessions as an agent, right? Where I'll be booked for like 3 hours. And in that time, they will funnel authors to me, right? Every 15 minutes or whatever. And they have to pitch. And the vast majority of the people who come in are so business. They're right on, okay, here's my project. Here's what it is. Here's the market. Here's that. And I unequivocally forget every single one of those. But the people who come in and connect with me as a person, right away, it's a different vibe. And right away, I will remember them. And I will think about them later and say, oh, I need to read that because that was interesting. Or I had that personal connection to that. So if you think about the people that you're meeting with as human beings and try to imagine what their position is like as they're meeting all of these people, what do they want? They want to have a good vibe, right?
Yeah, it's like they can sense if you're trying too hard in the meeting. They want you to try hard, but not when you're with them. They want you to try hard behind the scenes when you're working on your own stuff and you're coming up with ideas. And when you're there, they want it to just be easy. And it's, you know, it shows. And I will say, yes, Kellen, use the assets that you got. Use that cat. Tell them about the cheese. That's
funnier, honestly, and better than a cute little puppy because, you know, because it's sort of like, God. Oh, you got a character. The cat's a character. Or it's got conflict. It's got a flaw. You know, you can
every cat's a character.
You know? That's more interesting. Like you said,
my dogs have very strong personalities.
I have cheese on my desk. Sorry, he just can't stop attacking me. You know, like for me, that's
actually,
I would think that was funny, right? You're getting into a bit rather than cute dog. It's kind of like in dating profiles, all the guys who like pose with dogs just to like get win points. It's like, that's cheap. You know it's manufactured.
It's better than posing with a fish, though. I will say that.
In New York, men don't do that. But
like the fish.
Oh, I thought you meant like with a fish, like kissing it. I was like, why would anybody do that?
No, I meant like the hunting pictures. Yes. Yeah,
in the middle of the country, apparently.
No, people do that here too.
In this place called Middle America, apparently there's a phenomenon where on dating apps,
or just in life in general. But here's a great question from Chris. Okay, so what do we have to do to get that first meeting?
That's a harder question.
And this is like a question with like 18 subpoints, but like the answer is to have momentum, to have relationships that you start to leverage and you expand, like to know people in the film industry, to either that's if you really have no momentum, if you're not doing well in competitions or you don't have like a successful short film at a film festival, whatever it is, but like if you are having success somewhere, like if you get on, if you're a finalist for the Nichols, if you do success in a contest, you will get meetings. People will approach you. If you have a really successful short film, people will approach you for meetings. It's like you have to go where the people are looking. And why is that? Why does that happen? It's because a lot of producers just sort of check the list of certain things for material and writers. Like, oh, who's on the Nichols this year? Oh, who's recommended in the Juilliard playwriting program? Who's they're all just looking.
Yeah,
exactly. Who went viral? Yeah, it's just people are like looking at particular metrics, and they're probably not even looking themselves. Their assistants are basically gathering material and sending to them. Like, so that's one bucket. Like the most average thing is like you have some success or some momentum going. You've been writing strong material that's been puncturing these sort of gatekeeper barriers. The other way is through relationships. Sorry, I started with that. It's relationships and success, right? Relationships, which is how I've gotten all of every script I've ever optioned or all the success I've ever had has come through. Oh yeah, I know this guy. He's kind of looking for a horror film. What do you want to look at? I might send him your thing. Is that okay? And I'll be like, yes, please. Right? Like it's really hard to give people like specific timelines or like how things should work out with that. But like grow your network, make more friends, have meetings with people who aren't decision makers. Have meetings with the assistant, because you never know. Those people are sometimes have meetings with the gatekeeper's gatekeeper, sorry, not the gatekeeper's gatekeeper, but like the assistant to the assistant of the gatekeeper or a visual effects artist or whoever, people,
or a writer.
Yeah.
And all it takes really at the end of the day is one person who has their own network, who likes what you're doing and wants to do something nice for you, right? Like if that's you don't have to meet 1,000 people, but if you meet one person out of 30 people who you can leverage their network, that's the power of this. Now, that's not to say that like you should be parasitically like picking out friends.
It's a balance, right? Like,
right. Yeah, exactly.
Because like you want to make friends who are also in this industry. And the thing is that like, yes, to some level, when you're making friends in this industry, it's because it's important to network. But that can't be why you're doing it, I feel like. No. For the most part, that can't be why you're meeting people, because people will feel it. And it's just also just good for you to be immersed and to have other friends in the creative field. So that's something I try very hard to do. And probably if I could critique myself in college, I would have probably tried to make more connections, but like remind myself that it's okay for it to just be a friendship. Because I really intentionally did not, like when there was a speaker who was on some show, I was not one of the students who would rush them afterwards, because I'm like, I don't want to be that person who's like going up and asking for things. But I think that there's a balance where you can.
Those people are more likely to succeed. The people with delusions of grandeur, believe it or not, I think there's a high correlation between insane self-confidence that is kind of cringe and opportunities.
I think so,
because they're in the space. You're in the space.
And I think the ideal thing is to be someone who goes up there but is chill. That's kind of my understanding now.
Do you know? Okay, so here's what when I first started out in kind of the book world, what I did first was I started a book blog. And for a while I had a book blog, and my schedule was ridiculous. I had this really insane calendar that I was using to keep track of it all because it was unreal. And so at the time I was writing, I had the book blog. I was on Twitter when Twitter was still like a cool place. This was very early. Like this was like,
it was pre-threads.
This was a long time ago. But so I was on Twitter chats. Like I had 2 nights a week, I think, where I did Twitter chats, and then I did a book blog. So I made all of these connections with authors because I was reading and reviewing their books. And then I had all of these connections with authors because we were all writers and we were commiserating together and giving each other tips on the internet. I was also doing a lot of feedback and a lot of editorial work. So a lot of my initial opportunities in the industry came from like 1, social media. I've gotten multiple jobs from Twitter, and 2, just like meeting people and knowing people through being present in the space, right, on social media. I live in Northern Ontario. I don't have the opportunity to like call someone up in LA or New York and have a meeting if I don't travel. So using the internet was really critical for me. And making those friends. And then I got those opportunities. I proved myself because I worked really, really hard and I was very good at what I did. And that's how I got myself into spaces, where later on I would go to a party at like a club in New York. And then I would meet people who worked at a literary agency, became best friends with them and started working with the agency. Like those were like the kinds of things that happened because I set myself up for it. And it's not always natural to be like, okay, we have to be in this space. But I think that if we want to be successful, sometimes we have to at least be in a space, whether it's physical, whether it's online, whatever it is.
And I think you made a really good point about basically reading other people's work.
Reading other people's work.
I think Octavia came and talked to us about that. She was saying that some of the best connections she's ever made is just asking someone, can I read your script? Not doing a script swap, just saying, I'd love to read your script. And that's how, and then like grabbing coffee with them. And that's how she's made tons of her connections in the industry, because writers love having their stuff read, you know, like they love it, especially without the stress of having to read theirs back. I mean, maybe like emotionally I feel obligated, but still, you know, it's
but you learn, but you also learn a lot from reading other people's scripts, to the point where I would say it's actually critical that you read as many scripts as humanly possible, and in different areas of development. Like if you're only reading scripts that are in movies that are made, you're losing out. You should be reading scripts by beginners, by intermediates, by advanced people, by people who are on the blacklist, like, and talking about them with it, talking about process and character and finding all of those things. Like that's really where you're going to learn your craft.
Yeah.
Just to reiterate on that point, I think Stephen King's advice to writers, which is, you know, it's absolutely impossible to be a good writer if you don't read.
Absolutely.
Now, and he's talking about fiction. He's talking about writing fiction. You have to read fiction, right? But this is kind of like, if you want to write screenplays, you have to read screenplays regularly, you know. And I also think just read in general, like it helps.
Yeah.
I will do an obligatory link to our screenplay vault.
I've been doing a lot more reading lately. I've kind of fell out of it for a bit, and I felt terrible about it. I just wasn't happening. And now I've been reading, like I read every day again, and I'm actually getting through books, and it's unlocked a lot of things for me again, where I'm like, oh yeah, I can access these places in my brain and I can enjoy things, but also I can critique things on another level because I'm experiencing art in more ways.
I know that's something that John advocates for on a big level, is just experiencing more stories, and not even fictional stories necessarily, but like, you know, reading a lot of nonfiction, just reading things that interest you to just absorb stories. And it also ties in, the thing that helps me read more is thinking about the concept Adam introduced me to of confluence being like how creativity happens. Can you explain that better than I can?
Just the idea of that's just that creative solutions often come from taking two things that have nothing to do with each other and combining them, like the convergence of two ideas that were not associated. Like and when you're reading and when you're absorbing lots of art from different places, your mind can naturally sort of sort and filter and make those connections. And I think that's kind of what like great writing is, great ideas are. It's sort of, oh, this branch here has never been connected to this thing before. Boop. And that's your contribution as a writer, you know?
And I'll also say that being well read helps in meetings, because you never know, if you can just like rattle off something relevant and interesting in the moment, people love it. If you can recommend a book, people are like, wow, I'll never read that, but thank you. I feel very good about that.
I am the master of pretending to have read books that I have not read. I am so good at it. It's like, because I do, first of all, I do read books, but I've read 2 David Foster Wallace books. I've researched everything about him. For example, I've never read The Pale King, but I know exactly what it's about. And I know
you've talked to me about that book.
Not The Pale King, no. But,
I thought you've talked to me about it.
I've never read it, but I know enough to talk about it and have a conversation.
Yeah.
I've read his work, so I know how to say smart things about his stuff, right? So
you're still educated on it. You know, it's not, you may not have experienced it, but you're educated enough on it to bring that through, which I think is important.
You're like intelligently bluffing, you know?
Yeah. I really don't
educated guess
doing that. Actually read the books.
Reading is better, you know, and then just making the time for it. Because I really do notice, and I don't know if y'all notice this too, but I can really pick apart my influences of anything at a given time. If I go back and read something from a couple years ago, I'll be like, ooh, I was reading this, or I was watching this or playing this video game when I wrote this. And I can tell because the influences will creep in.
Oh yeah. Or I'll be like, I was listening to this song on repeat as I wrote this. And now if I listen to a song, I can remember what I was writing, especially like those like intense emo songs. I'm like, wow, I was like in 5th grade in my room writing on the RuneScape forums to this, you know, because I was a cool kid. Also, so quick question here. How do you read the Blacklist scripts? So if you check the script vault, I believe we have the Blacklist for 2022 all linked there. It's under...
Yeah, they get circulated at some point after they're announced. I think they try to keep it private for a little while, and then somebody at some point always circulates it.
Yeah, they get out.
Always leaks.
Yeah, so here's the direct link to that. Let me grab it.
But they're great. They're really a great read. And Acne, so the Blacklist is this service. It's 2 things. One is it's a service where you can get feedback and ratings on your screenplays and industry members to read it. And then it's a list at the end of the year, which is a much more political thing, of the, top 50 unproduced screenplays of the year. It's a very big to do. If you get on the list, you are noticed by a lot of people. And it's a really, it's a great thing to read because you can really get an eye for what the pulse is on what people are looking for and what people are interested in screenwriting. And they're always excellent and really good examples of what to strive for.
But the service is very different from the the list that is released. And we were talking very specifically about the 50 scripts that are on the Blacklist.
So this is the list we're talking about, for 2022. This is what it looks like. This is the Blacklist. And the link I sent before is a link to, I think, almost all of these scripts, if not all of them. And they're numbered and everything. So you can check those out. But
what's interesting about them... Oh, sorry, you finish, Alexie.
I was just saying, when you know, because of where I went to school and everything, I know a lot of people who've ended up on the Blacklist. And, it is never, my God, I am shocked. It's it takes a lot of work to get on the Blacklist. It's the best unproduced. It was created by the script readers, the gatekeepers, where they're like, hey, by the way, email me your top 5 scripts of the year or whatever. And then they put together the ones that are mentioned the most and they circulate it. And it started off as a very casual email list. Now it's much more known and fancy and a big deal. And also as it became more known and fancy and a big deal, people started campaigning to get on it. So when they knew they're being filled out, savvy writers will email people who have read their script and say, hey, I just hope you remember my script when you're thinking about the Blacklist. So it's, it's a
certain kind of person to do that, to be able to do that, I think.
Yeah, it's because Cosmo was telling us that he did that on a coffee class a while ago. And I was just like, dang, that's a level of confidence I don't have yet. But I need it.
We get there.
Sorry, Adam, I cut you off.
I forgot what I was going to say. So
anything about the Blacklist?
Yeah, something about the Blacklist. It's fine. Oh yeah. That a lot of the scripts on there would make terrible movies, or are not very producible concepts. They're just the best reads, or were considered the best reads by producers, right? So there are a lot of scripts that were kind of written to be read and not made. Some of them are so meta commentary on the film industry, or there was one that was about Harry Potter fan fiction or something.
It was fan fiction.
Yeah. So some weird stuff makes it on that list. It's not a list of scripts you're oh, these are all going to be amazing movies. Some of them are. And I think every year some of them actually get made, right?
Yeah, Chang Can Dunk.
Yeah, that's coming out soon.
Yeah, that's
we'll see if it's good.
I think. That was the number 1, I think. Wasn't it? 2?
I think it was 2. Because I think that was Headhunter. I think that was Headhunter year.
Oh, and there was such mixed feelings about Headhunter on Screenwriting Reddit. I will say, I remember that. Honestly,
it was okay.
reading
The
these
first half was
scripts, great. Yeah. I mean, reading these scripts is really, really helpful to make your script readable and to make it something that people remember. And so if you don't know where to start, this also helps you understand what's standing out to producers now. reading old scripts is useful for like your craft and like your knowledge, but you're not going to be emulating the way a script was written in the golden age of cinema or even 10 years ago. Scripts look different over time as styles change. So this is a great place to look.
And these are your contemporaries, you know, like when you're reading these scripts, it's like, okay, these are the people that you're legitimately competing against for people's attention in the space. And if you don't feel like your script could stand in this list, then I think it's a good indication to be like, okay, I've got to go back to work. I've got to meet with my writers group. I have to get some more feedback and see how I can make it better and how I can make it stand among this list.
I kind of want to circle back a little bit to pitching and just like the practicalities of pitching your own idea and kind of like our own experiences there. What's some of, Adam, I know you got into it a little bit more, but in terms of like the actual story, not just showing up into the room and like the whole experience, do you all have any thoughts about what makes the story part of the pitch stronger or weaker or anything like that?
Yeah, it's all about the concept, right? And it's all about the concept as it relates to a commercial expectation and idea, right? It's the it's kind of what you sometimes you can articulate kind of these Frankenstein log lines that are like, it's like Chipmunks but the Hunger Games, you know, or it's like Lost in Space but about the porn industry, you know, like you know, that's horrible, but
is it
conceptually understanding how to place what your script is into the mind of somebody else as fast as possible is actually helpful at the writing stage, to be like, what is this thing I'm writing, right? From a marketing point of view, like how are producers going to sell this to the money people?
Yeah.
How is this going to end up on a poster? How is this going to be a trailer? You know, I'm not saying that you should write to market. Never, don't do that. But you should write to fit in market.
Yeah.
You know, like tell your truth, tell your stories, but like make sure that like what you're doing can conceptually come across. I'm not saying it should be X meets Y. I'm saying that's one example.
It can be.
It can be. That's just one way in, right?
And buzzwords.
Buzzwords. I also think another way is to sort of, I've actually found like, this is a world where X is true is a good one, right?
Oh, that's,
like that just to like start people to be like if you start like logline regurgitation, that you should have the logline as the first thing people read in the written pitch deck, obviously. But if like you're verbally trying to communicate your idea, you're going to have a different weight of gravity. You're going to have a different thing you're going to focus on. It might be different for some people. I've had meetings where I've pitched the same idea 2 different ways to different people. Like I did one where I did do the X meets Y, and then the other person, I just had this feeling like, oh, that's not the way to do this. I'm going to focus on character and emotion for them. Like, okay, it's
emotional
about this person in this situation, and it's about belonging, and their relationship with their dad, and they go from here to here. And then and it's a world where this is true, right? Like the order of, do I talk about what's cool about the setting? Or do I talk about what's cool about the character? Or do I just like talk about like what the movie feels like and is in a second, right? It reminds, but you know, sometimes you get this wrong too. Like sometimes you present the wrong thing to the wrong person. Like some people, you could just tell like, oh, this guy loves hard science fiction. I'm going to talk about the world first. Okay, this person seems to have never read a fantasy or sci-fi book in their life. I'm going to start with the character first. You know, it's kind of like, you got to have like this sort of intuitive sense of like, what am I going to talk about? So I would sort of put it in these buckets of like, do I talk about what's awesome about the character and the character arc in the movie? Do I talk about like the concept on a big level? Like what is the poster? What's the idea of this? What's the confluence? What's the X meets Y? Is it 2 other movie ideas they know to put an idea in their mind? Or is it 2 kind of ideas? Like, okay, what if vampires did X, right? You know, you can do a lot of framing devices, but what's important is to sort of make sure that you're saying the right thing to the right person. Because if you're talking to somebody who like seems to be really into like independent cinema and like, you know, really small emotional stories, and they like hate, like, you know, you can just tell that that's their vibe. Talk about character, you know, talk about what it is, you know, like you talk about what you think would connect with that person and then work backwards from there.
Mm-hmm.
And be excited. I mean, I think like the really important part about this is like when you're pitching this, you can't just be like, well, it's kind of like this. Like you have to pitch that. You have to really find like your root, like what excited you about this project when you first started it, and you have to funnel that. Because if you do not do that, people are not going to want to go on the ride with you.
That's
you're gonna be a Hollywood hack, right? Like if you're basically saying, if you're just saying, okay, it's about this and this and this, like, no, you're totally right. You're like, when I say like, oh, talk about character, talk about why it's important to you, and like your gut, like make it personal, right? That's the secret. Like the why me has to happen in the first 30 seconds. And you could do a why me about the world. You could do a why me about your experience with the subject. You could do a why me about why you're close to the character. But you got to pick a why me, and you've got to like, you got to go personal fast.
So a lot of the ways that have been most successful to me is, first off, this is why it's so important to get that casual conversation going first, because you need them to talk before you start pitching so you can understand who the person is that you're pitching to. And then I don't think I've ever done a hard pitch where it's like, okay, well, actually, I have a story about those. I've never done one. I've been supposed to do one twice and did not know. I will talk about that later. But, you know, it's, terrible, horrible experience. But in general, what I do is I will talk about why I wrote it. And I won't it won't be like really heavy. But a lot of times what I'll do is, I'm trying to remember how. So what I would do is like, there was a movie that or a TV show that I was writing, and it came to me because I really love history and I was reading books about pirates, and I found like this little footnote that was about the potential lesbian relationship between Anne Bonny and Mary Read. And that sent me down this spiral, this like rabbit hole into queer pirates. And I started reading all these amazing things and these stories that just sound way too wild to be true. Like these people were nuts, and they would, I don't know, wear costumes, trick people, do all kinds of fun stuff. And so I decided that I wanted to write a story in that world. And so I did. And that would be how I would get into it, really.
Your inception point.
Yeah. I would tell them that, and then it would be much fresher in my mind. So I would get even more excited about what got me into it. And then I could see, based on talking about that, what part they reacted to. People love gay pirates, I will say. That one has never failed to like make people want to read it, just talking about gay pirates. But
and then they made that show. HBO.
And then they did that. You know what, Adam? We don't have to talk about my history of making things that are immediately made right after. That's okay. But yeah, then my other two worst pitch meetings ever were when the person said like, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Like, come back. We'll have a casual conversation. I want to keep it loose. And I come back and they're like, okay, so what's your pitch? I'm like, that is not what you said. That is not what you said. You said you wanted to develop this together. And I will tell them like low key what I was thinking. And they're like, is that your pitch? I'm like, no, because I wasn't making a pitch. But you know what?
I would always make a pitch, Alexie.
Now I know. But I took people at their word too much, and I've learned to never do that again. Never give somebody a development draft. Never give somebody a development pitch. Always do it the whole way.
My interpretation,
even if they say don't.
Even my interpretation of, oh yeah, let's work on this together, have a casual conversation, is that they wanted you to do a pitch and then work from there, right? Like,
yeah, you're going to do the hard lifting, and then they're going to infuse their ideas into it with as little, effort as possible. And then you're going to continue to do the hard work to make it better.
In fairness, my manager got my impression too. Got the same impression as me. So it's not just me. I was like, okay, so do I need to do a whole pitch? And he's like, no, I think that they want to do like, because you know that they like to develop things in-house now. So
yeah, everybody does.
But I was just straight up wrong. Misread that situation. But you know what? Learned.
But you know what? That's an interesting point about flexibility. I think that like no matter how much work you've done on your project and how much you believe in it, if you want to go through the system, like the system, whatever, you have to be really flexible and you've got to be ready. Like you could be in a meeting where someone says, okay, stop talking. And they interrupt you and they say, what about if it was like this? And if you can't pivot on that and like think, okay, this is what I would do, like you should be able to do that.
Yeah, no, for sure. And that's totally legit. For me, it was like they asked me to come in with a concept and I did tons of research, read all these books, found a few like amazing nuggets that I thought would be cool stories. And they were like, okay, so what's the break into like act 3? Like what are these specific plot points? Like what happens leading up to the midpoint? And I'm like, I didn't break this 100% already. Like you have to pay for treatments, dude. But that's what they're trying to avoid, honestly.
They want you to be on the fly, right? They want you to be able to be like, okay, here's what I would do. And they want you to be able to do it in that amount of time of spitballing. And I think the reason that became like that is just that there are so many writers who can do that. Right? Yeah. So when you're working with people who are like brilliant on the fly, you kind of get used to that and that becomes the expectation. And then we all have to like get there.
Yeah. I also think it's just that people don't want to pay for treatments.
Yeah. Frankly. And that's fair too. Yeah.
And they don't. Yeah. Which is, God, I really hope that the writer's strike gets everything they want. Everything we want. Yeah. We'll see.
But then, sorry, I thought I just had on to compound on that is that if you do not want to work in the system, if this does not sound appealing to you, if you don't want to change your work and you don't want to do this, you've got to make your stuff yourself. And you have to find ways to do that, whether that's directing, whether that's finding a director to be in a partnership with who does your work and you have a good relationship. It's kind of one or the other. You either have to be flexible, ready for feedback, work within the confines of the system, or you've got to do it yourself and you've got to be ready to put in that work.
100%. Making your own stuff is really, really cool. And that's
everyone should do it.
We had Acme make a comment about that before, about how that they got kind of lucky with their first short film. It was niche, talked to a Forbes writer, turned out that they were a former Disney producer.
So that's exactly when I was talking about the two kind of general pathways, which is one is success in some capacity and the other is just pure relationship building. That's an example of, you made something and it got you momentum. It gave you something. Like people reached out to you.
And then it's the other side too, because they reached out to you because of your success. You went through with the networking, and then it turned out that they actually were a bigger connection than you realized.
That's why you should always be nice to every single person you interact with, because you never know who really you're talking to and who they know. Because
in life,
especially in LA, in life, but I think being from LA originally, like
they might have a famous dad. You don't know.
Or their best friend might be the son of somebody. You never know. And that's why
don't be like
move to LA. That's why people say move to LA or have historically. It's because people have just like grown up there and gone to high school there, and like screenwriters have kids that go into school. You know what I mean? Like it's easier just in the mundane life of things to meet people.
It's an ecosystem.
Even John's success story is that he was in one of those birthing classes, like what's it called?
Like the baby
prenatal. It's Lamaze.
Yeah, he was in a Lamaze class next to a producer, and he accosted the guy in the Lamaze class. That's literally how John broke into the film industry, right? So like, if he was in a Lamaze class in Montana or in Ohio, where John is from Ohio, he would have never met. He would have never been a screenwriter, right? So.
Yeah. And honestly, Acme, here's the thing about taking meetings that you're not quite ready for. That is not bad to wait, because when you go to these meetings, you want to not only have the script you have, you probably want to have at least one more. And you want to have things you're working on. Like having the project that they're interested in and at least one more ready to go, bare minimum. And then my manager didn't even want me to bother flying out from New York to LA until I had 4 features that I could talk about. Because, I mean, first off, it's a hassle to go there, and you want to have different things to appeal to different people to set up enough meetings to make it worth it. And then also, like, you want to be able to tell them about the other stuff you do. One of the most common experiences that I've had as a writer going into meetings is, we love the script, we want to meet you, but we already have something like this in development, or there is something like this in development somewhere else, or this isn't quite what we're looking for yet, but we want to hear what else you got, tends to be like one of the most common things.
Even ideas. Even if you have, I'm sure most of us have a big folder list somewhere of a bunch of ideas. Like, don't throw those out. If you abandon them, just leave them there, because you never know. That could be the thing. This project that you abandoned however long ago, they could say, what do you have? If you run out of topics, you can say, well, I have this. And they could be like, that's it. That's the project.
Yeah. And I agree, Sylvester. Be kind. It's simple. Be a good person. Yeah, that's true too. Like, people will remember you, and you want it to be a good memory.
People want to have a good time. People want to work with people who are enjoyable and fun and nice. Like, when you think about when you're networking with people and you're making friends, like, you don't want to be friends with the really combative person who doesn't feel good to be around, right? And that's the same thing for all of this. Like, if you are just like a great person, people will remember that.
And you'll have a better time.
It's amazing how many combative, weird people live in LA. It's actually kind of crazy. Like,
do you think it's like more per capita than average, or just like
move there to make it in the film industry? There's some. I remember just going on with these characters who just have these like weird ego trips, and they're just like, I'm gonna be the next whatever. Fuck everything. I'm a genius. Give me what I deserve. This whole manifest destiny thing. There are like lots of guys like that in LA.
Yeah,
or at least were when I was there.
And you'll never be the next somebody else.
You're gonna be you, if anything.
You got to be you. You got to make you really cool and fun and great.
And being you could be great or bad, depending on who you are.
You got to make you better too, and by reading books like How to Talk to People, so you can choose the best parts of you to put forward.
Well, on that note, be good, be a good person, and we'll see y'all next week.
Yeah, let us know if there's anything you want us to talk about. We're going to be doing more casual, kind of just sharing our own personal experiences in this wild industry. So please let us know if there's anything you want to hear about. If anything we said struck your interest? Striked? Theo, you know words better than me.
I think that technically both are correct, but I would say struck.
Okay, if anything struck your interest, thank you, Theo, then please let us know, and we will be happy to talk about it some more. But hope you have a good weekend. Bye.